The moon hung high above the rural landscape, casting ghostly shadows across the fields. In the stillness of the night, a thrilling unease crackled in the air. Somewhere between the howl of the wind and the rustling leaves, two figures crept through the tall grass, their hearts pounding with excitement and fear. They were burglars, hunters of gold, the kind of treasure that glittered like stars against the dark sky. Joshua and Mark had spent weeks marking their target, an unsuspecting farmer they believed was hoarding a fortune in gold coins, rusted jewelry, and maybe even priceless antiques passed down through generations. The farmer had a reputation in town, a grumpy old man who seemed to have more than his share of luck. Little did they know, luck has a way of landing in unexpected places. They reached the farmhouse, a quaint structure overshadowed by centuries-old oak trees, gnarled by time. With careful whispers, they coordinated their approach. As they edged closer, night creatures chorused a symphony of dread, but for Joshua and Mark, the promise of gold drowned out the warnings that echoed in the dark. They slid toward the back door, no alarms, no dogs, just an invitation to slip into mischief. Heartbeats between them raced, mingling with the rustling grass beneath their feet. Inside the dimly lit house, an air of stillness wrapped around them like a shroud. The burglars crept through the narrow halls. The place felt alive, silent portraits watching their every move. They could almost hear the grandfather clock ticking, each chime a reminder of time slipping away. In the heart of the house, they stumbled upon the living room, a treasure trove of dusty relics. Old photographs captured smiles long faded and trinkets from a bygone era lined the shelves. But their eyes zeroed in on a weathered wooden chest in the corner, an aura of mystery surrounding it. Could it be? Gold surely must lie within. Joshua's fingers trembled with anticipation as he approached the chest. He whispered, his voice barely piercing the silence. Mark shrugged, adrenaline coursing through him, pushing them forward. With a rush fueled by the promise of fortune, Joshua forced it open, sending a cloud of dust swirling around them. Inside lay, not gold, but a jumble of old tools, rusted nails, and forgotten memories. The thrill of the hunt began to falter. Frustration flared as Joshua slammed the chest shut. "This is a waste of time," he muttered, dark thoughts swirling through his mind. They had risked it all for a myth, a trick of the town, but Mark wasn't ready to give up. The thrill of the chase ignited something primal within him. "Let's check upstairs," he urged, an almost desperate hunger creeping into his voice. With a sudden sense of purpose, the two burglars ascended the staircase, each step creaking beneath their weight. An intoxicating hope filled the air as they reached the second floor, where the room seemed to whisper secrets of the past. They began opening doors one by one, revealing cozy bedrooms decorated with lace curtains and faded wallpaper. Every room screamed of a life lived fully, untouched by time, until they reached the last door. Across the threshold, a soft light leaked through the cracks. The room felt different, charged with an energy that made their skin prickle. Joshua grasped the handle, heart racing. Breath, no turning back now. He swung the door open, eyes wide with expectation. But what lay before them was no golden bounty. Instead, the room was filled with farm equipment, hay bales stacked high, and something else, something extraordinary. At the very center, a massive bag sat bulging, gleaming even in the dim light. Mark whispered, stepping closer. With cautious hands, Joshua approached the bag, excitement rekindling his spirits. He pulled the drawstring, revealing the shimmering contents inside. Gold coins, stacks of gleaming jewelry glittered like stars against the dark fabric. They were rich. Suddenly, the night felt magical, like a dream dancing at their fingertips. But as they celebrated, a deep chuckle resonated from the shadows of the room. "Looks like you boys found my little secret," a voice drawled, thick and assured. Startled, they turned, and there stood the farmer, his arms crossed, a knowing grin plastered across his weathered face. He was a figure carved from the very earth, strong and steady. If fear had been rattling their bones, it melted away, replaced by shock. The farmer's eyes twinkled with amusement. He continued, stepping out of the shadows with the ease of someone who'd walked this path many times before. Mark stuttered, "We were." The farmer cut in, his voice a playful growl. The burglar's bravado began to dissolve. In that instant, it became painfully obvious. The farmer wasn't just any farmer. He was a man who had outsmarted greed time and again, and tonight was no different. He chuckled again, this time with the lightness of laughter, and motioned to the bag. "So you wanted gold, here's a little lesson for you." With that, he swung the bag toward them, revealing its true contents. But instead of riches, it was filled with hay and old tools, the embellishments glimmering only from the occasional moonlight. The laughter that came from him echoed in the stillness of the room, a sound that reverberated through their very souls, mixing with the whispers of regret. Joshua and Mark stood there, their faces betraying their realization. "You played us," Mark said, anger bristling in his voice, but even that lacked conviction. "Not played." The farmer leaned against the wall, eyes twinkling. "You see, I knew you were coming. I've seen it all before." The burglars exchanged glances, fear resurrecting as they slowly backed away. "Let me give you some advice," the farmer continued, voice steady as oak. "You keep chasing after shiny things and you'll always end up empty-handed." Joshua opened his mouth, trying to find words, but nothing came. The moment hung heavy in the air, a silent reckoning. They had come for gold, but had stumbled upon wisdom. The farmer straightened, eyes narrowing. A moment of silence stretched infinitely. Both burglars held their breath, waiting for the inevitable threat. "Or," he continued, "you can help me with my farm tomorrow." Stunned silence met his invitation, treasures in one hand, labor in the other. For all their bravado, they had never considered the weight of such a choice. With a mixture of disbelief and grudging respect, Joshua nodded while Mark shifted guiltily. "Okay." And with that, the tension eased. The farmer's eyes twinkled like the stars outside, thick with hidden laughter at life's irony. They found themselves walking back toward the door, the promise of gold replaced with the allure of growth. Instinctively, they all sensed it. The real treasure lay in the simplest of things: a hand in the soil, the sun on your back, the laughter shared around a table. As they left the farmhouse, the moonlight guided them down the paths where shadows danced, leaving behind the glitter of empty hopes exchanged for something profound. In the days that followed, the burglars stayed true to their word and woke before dawn, digging their hands deep into the earth. They learned the symphony of growth, the harmony of nature's rhythm, sweat turning into gratitude, patience creating resilience. Where they once sought golden coins, they now found seeds. The farmer taught them how to cultivate the land, to respect the cycle of seasons. And as the seasons changed, so did they. The old man had wanted them to understand. Gold might shine brightly, but the harvest was worth far more than glitter. Weeks turned into months. What began as a robbery turned into a partnership. The farmer's laughter replaced moments of greed, and the two ex-burglars crafted new plans, not of theft, but of growth and abundance. In this surreal twist of fate, they discovered that sometimes the biggest treasures lie not in gold, but in the unexpected journey of life, a pulse of connection and purpose that danced just beyond their reach. Tonight, as they stood side by side beneath the starlit sky, they could hardly believe how far they had come. Burglars had become farmers. The farmer had outsmarted them, and somehow they all had made an unlikely friend. The moon shone brightly above, a witness to the transformation, a testament to how the greatest treasures in life often don't glitter at all. Instead, they lie in the laughter shared, the lessons learnt, and the soil that sustains us all. The night lay heavy with silence, broken only by the rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. In the heart of the countryside, a modest farmhouse stood under the watchful gaze of the moon, its windows flickering with the warmth of oil lamps. But underneath the surface calm, a pulse of tension swirled in the air. Two shadows crept towards the old building. Their hearts beat loudly against the stillness, a rhythm of anticipation and dread. Joshua and Mark were hungry for a score, convinced that their next big break was just beyond the creaky old door. They had heard tales around the local bar about an eccentric farmer who hoarded treasure gold coins and antique trinkets stashed away over decades. They'd laughed at the ridiculousness of the rumor, but that night, driven by desperation and a thrill they could hardly contain, they decided to test the legend. As they approached, their eyes glimmered with greed. Would this be the night that changed everything? Would they finally escape the drudgery of their lives with a handful of golden coins tucked away in their pockets? The thrill was intoxicating. Carefully, they turned the rusty doorknob. It creaked, echoing like a warning through the stillness. The inside of the farmhouse was dark, yet strangely inviting. Dust motes floated lazily in the faint light of the moon spilling in through a grimy window. They entered, hearts racing, minds swirling with visions of riches. Mark asked, barely keeping his voice down. "Let's check the living room first," Joshua suggested, leading the way. The pair moved with practiced stealth, silently navigating their way past furniture covered in sheets, relics of a life forgotten, or perhaps preserved for a future that never came. They rummaged through drawers, tossing aside old photos and letters, the remnants of a life that seemed oddly untouched by time. But they found nothing of value, just memories wrapped in dust. Each moment dragged on like a weight that pressed heavily on their shoulders, yet still they pushed forward, driven by the promise of gold. It was then they spotted it, the glint of something shiny peeking through a crack in a cabinet. Hope surged within them. With bated breath, Joshua yanked the door open, heart pounding against the walls of his chest. But inside, instead of gold, they found a pile of old farming tools, dulled by rust, unearthed only by the thief's eager hands. Joshua slammed the cabinet shut. Frustration simmered just beneath his skin. "Where is it?" "Deep breath," Mark replied, trying to regain some composure. "We can't give up yet." The two burglars climbed the narrow staircase, each creak underfoot echoing in the stillness, a reminder that they weren't alone. As they reached the top, a flicker of light danced beneath a closed door at the end of the hall. Adrenaline surged anew. They exchanged glances, excitement crackling in the air like static. "Here's our chance," Mark whispered, nodding toward the door that held a promise of salvation. Joshua reached for the knob, gripping it tightly, and turned it slowly, holding his breath as he pushed the door open. Light poured into the hallway like a flood, washing over their anxious faces. But what they found inside was far from what they had imagined. The room brimmed with more old tools, but in the center was a massive burlap sack, bulging ominously. This had to be it, the treasure they sought. "Open it," Mark urged, eyes gleaming with anticipation. With trembling hands, Joshua moved closer to the sack, ready to unveil their future. He pulled the drawstring and opened it, the contents spilling forth with a clatter. And there it was, copper, silver, and gold shining in the soft light, coins gleaming like stars scattered on the floor. Mark cried, his voice dripping with disbelief and triumph. But euphoria turned quickly into confusion. They both leaned closer, and their laughter faded into an uneasy silence. The coins weren't the fortune they had dreamed of. Instead, they were old, tarnished, filled with the wear of decades, seemingly worthless compared to the vibrant illusions they had built in their heads. Anger brewed in Joshua's chest, frustration boiled over. "What is this?" Suddenly, a voice interrupted their thoughts. They whipped around, shock etching deep lines in their faces. The farmer stood before them, tall and imposing, arms crossed over his chest, a knowing smirk dancing on his weathered lips. Mark stammered, heart racing. "I've seen my fair share of intruders," the farmer replied calmly, stepping closer. The weight of his words had a tangible quality, laying heavily over them. They felt the panic rise in their throats. They had thought they were clever, but here was a man who hadn't just lived through their plan, he had prepared for it. Joshua glanced at Mark, and the tension hung thick in the air. "We didn't mean any harm," he said, trying to regain some control. The farmer interrupted, the amusement in his eyes sharp as glass. Their bravado slipped away in the unseen leap of fear. "Let us go," Mark urged, stepping back, but the farmer's stature filled the whole doorway, blocking their escape. "Not so fast, boys," he replied, his voice tinged with authority. Joshua opened his mouth again, but the words slipped away like grains of sand through his fingers. He forced out desperation, clues illuminating his face. The farmer shifted, his face serious now. "I could call the sheriff," Mark echoed, brow furrowing. "Indeed, you came here chasing shiny coins, yet I believe you're missing the real treasure," the farmer stated, gaze piercing through the dim light. Joshua and Mark exchanged confused looks, uncertain of where this was heading. Joshua asked, suspicious, "I've seen many greed-filled souls come and go, but very few realize that this land can teach you far more than gold ever could." The challenge struck them both, leaving an echo of defiance in the air. "You have no idea what we've been through," Mark defended himself, defensiveness layering his voice. "Maybe not. But I do know what it takes to make a living from the land," the farmer continued, tone steady. "And I can show you if you're willing to put in the work." They stood there, rooted in disbelief. This entire situation was turning on its head. Here they were, thieves caught in a stranger's home, and this man was offering them an opportunity instead of revenge. Joshua finally asked, still reeling. "Because you're not the only ones desperate out there," the farmer replied, a softness creeping into his voice. Cynicism began to fade as intrigue took its place. Mark glanced at Joshua, pondering the depths of that offer. The farmer chuckled softly. "If you planned to run, you wouldn't have made it this far. You'd have run before I found you, but now you stand at a crossroads." Tentatively, they looked at one another, pondering the weight of the offer laid before them. Could their lives change? Was this old man truly offering redemption? The farm was only a day's work away, an entire harvest of lessons waiting for them beyond the House of Shadows. "Okay," Mark finally said, his voice trembling with both fear and newfound resolve. "We'll stay." The farmer smiled, nodding as if he'd known their decision all along. "Good. It's time to turn your backs on greed." And thus, the two burglars stepped beyond their pasts, guided by the farmer's steadfast hands. They began their journey in the fields, and the days turned into weeks as they plunged their hands into the soil, feeling the earth breathe beneath them. The physical labor was grueling, the sweat pouring down their backs as they tilled the land, planting seeds, nurturing the crops, and toiling under the sun. But with every weed they uprooted and every soil they turned, something began to change inside them. They learned the rhythm of the land, the cycle of planting, growing, and harvesting. They shared laughs under the sun, wearing the dirt like badges of honor, their conversations shifting from desperate escape to dreams of what could be. As harvest time approached, their once sameless existence blossomed with new purpose. They discovered a fulfillment that golden coins could never replicate, a laughter-filled harvest dinner under the stars with fresh produce, echoing the promise of future seasons yet to come. When the next autumn came, they stood across from the farmer, eyes bright with hope, hearts unburdened. Joshua and Mark had transformed. The richness they'd once sought in coins now shimmered in the relationships they had built, the sweat on their brows, and the laughter shared in the fields. In leaving their misguided paths behind, they had found a treasure far greater than any legend whispered in the night. As twilight descended, the farmer leaned against a nearby fence, watching them two men who had come for gold but had walked away with the secret of life's true wealth. And in that moment, the farmer smiled to himself. He had won after all, flipping the script of greed with the simple teachings of the earth. Just like that, he had turned two lost souls into something beautifully untouched by gold. The night was thick with unease, the kind that makes your skin crawl and your instincts scream danger. Underneath the watchful gaze of a bright moon, two figures prowled through the tall grass, edging closer to the farmhouse that sat at the end of a lonely dirt road. Shadows swallowed them whole, every rustle of the wind playing tricks on their ears. Joshua and Mark were not just any ordinary pair. They were burglars on a mission. For weeks, whispers had floated through the small town about an old farmer who had struck gold figuratively, and they hoped literally. Tales of treasure hidden beneath the floorboards or tucked away in dusty cabinets danced on the lips of everyone they'd met at the local diner. Their curiosity and greed collided in a dangerous game that led them to the very door of a man who had spent the better part of his life tending to the earth. As they reached the rickety porch, their hearts pounded like drums. "Can you believe this? We're about to hit the jackpot," Mark hissed, eyes gleaming with a mix of excitement and fear. "SHH. Just focus," Joshua replied, his voice low, barely above a whisper. He adjusted the mask that covered half his face, a pathetic disguise that did little to conceal the hesitation in his eyes. "Let's just get what we came for and get out." Silently, they crept to the back of the house. The moonlight spilled into the alley between the buildings, creating eerie shadows and flickering patterns that set their nerves on edge. Joshua remembered all the times they dreamt about what they might find: gold coins, shiny jewelry, maybe even antique paintings. Each thought sent a rush of adrenaline coursing through their veins. With clammy hands, they pushed open the old door, the wooden frame groaning in protest. The interior was dimly lit, the air thick with the smell of aged wood and earth. Dust motes danced in the scant light streaming from the lone lamp in the corner. They stepped inside, hearts racing with equal parts excitement and dread, and the door creaked softly behind them as if urging them to reconsider their choices. Mark asked, peering into the living room cluttered with old furniture and faded photographs. Time seemed to stand still in this room, caught in a web of memories that whispered untold stories. "Let's check the kitchen," Joshua suggested, impatience bubbling up inside him. He felt the promise of gold in his gut, urging him to take the lead. They moved further into the house, their minds racing with possibilities. In the kitchen, they rifled through drawers filled with mismatched utensils and expired cans of food. There was no sign of treasure here, just the remnants of a life lived. But as they rummaged through the cabinets, a glint caught Joshua's eye. He shuffled closer, excitement crackling in the air. He called, reaching for what appeared to be an old, dusty box. He yanked it open, revealing nothing but crumbling newspapers and rusted screwdrivers. Deflated, Joshua slammed the box shut and turned to Mark, frustration bubbling over. "Keep looking," Mark urged, but uncertainty lingered in his voice. The thrill was fading fast and both men knew it. If this was a bust, their plans would crumble just as quickly as they'd built them. They abandoned the kitchen in search of more promising finds, creeping cautiously toward the old staircase that spiraled upward into darkness. The moment they stepped onto the first creaky stair, a sense of foreboding enveloped them. What if someone caught them? What if this was a mistake? "Let's just check one floor," Joshua insisted, gripping the railing tightly. They climbed, pulse quickening with each step, shadows casting odd shapes on the wooden walls, as if the house itself was warning them to turn back. As they reached the top, they stumbled upon a long hallway lined with closed doors, each one standing like a sentinel cloaked in secrets. They chose the first door on their right, pushing it open slowly to reveal a room awash in moonlight. What they found there was nothing short of bizarre. The room was cluttered with numerous oddities, old machines, antique furniture, and stacks of dusty books, all seemingly inconsequential. But what immediately caught their attention was a large chest sitting proudly against the wall. Mark exclaimed, eyes widening. Joshua approached the chest cautiously, breath hitching in his throat. The thrill surged within him once more. He knelt before it, fingers trembling, and undid the rusty latch. The lid creaked open, revealing an assortment of trinket-sold coins, yes, but also tarnished silverware and broken jewelry. "Not exactly what we wanted," Joshua muttered, disappointment clinging to his words. As Joshua rummaged through the chest, a gasp suddenly escaped Mark's lips. "Wait!" He pointed to a large burlap sack tucked away in the corner, almost as if it had been intentionally hidden. "Whatever it is, it's got to be worth something," Joshua said, the spark of hope igniting once more. He reached for the sack and yanked it closer, feeling its weight. With a swift motion, he tore it open, expecting to uncover glimmering riches. But instead of gold, what spilled out was a collection of rusty farming tools and worn-out ropes. The air turned thick with disappointment, the reality of their failure pressing down upon them. Joshua clenched his fists in anger, frustration boiling over. He shouted, kicking the chest in indignation. Mark nodded, his shoulders slumping in defeat. But just as they began to turn away, the unexpected happened. The door swung open, and there stood the farmer, tall and imposing, with eyes that seemed to pierce right through their pretenses. He was no simple old man. No, he was the embodiment of years spent toiling under the sun, wise and astute. His voice rumbled like thunder, booming through the room. They froze. Panic twisted their insides. The two men had thought they were the ones in control, here to take what wasn't theirs. But in that moment, they realized the farmer had been the true keeper of all secrets. "We didn't mean anything," Mark stammered, fumbling for words. "Oh, I can see that," the farmer replied, a bemused grin spreading across his face. "You thought you'd get away with it, didn't you?" Joshua opened his mouth, but the words stuck in his throat. They had come for gold, like moths drawn to a flame, believing they could outsmart the very man who had spent his life nurturing the land. "You," Joshua managed to say, desperation coloring his tone. The farmer chuckled, the sound deep and rich. "Gold? You think treasure is just about shiny coins and baubles? Mark faltered, confusion etched on his face. "We did this because you're looking for an easy way out," the farmer interjected, stepping closer. "You think you can steal your way to riches while ignoring the hard work involved in building a life." Anger flared in Joshua's chest, but it mingled with something else, a twinge of recognition. They stood there, torn between the spiral of their wrongdoings and the unexpected truth embedded in the farmer's words. "Look around you," he continued, motioning to the room filled with hidden treasures that time had weathered. "Every single item in this house represents years of labor, sweat, and tears that you can't simply take. You have to earn it." The weight of his words sank in, enveloping them in a suffocating grip. The world outside felt smaller now, their dreams of gold reduced to mere illusions. Mark asked, voice steadying, "Simple, or you can come back tomorrow and help me on this farm. Earn a living the right way." Both burglars exchanged glances, uncertainty etched on their faces. Could they truly turn back? "You'll learn the value of hard work and maybe even find fulfillment," the farmer offered, his voice softening. Joshua, caught in a whirlpool of conflicting emotions, found a strange sense of clarity there. He thought of the fleeting excitement that had driven them to this point. Was stealing really the answer to their problems, or was it only masking a deeper emptiness? Mark asked, almost hopefully. With a measured breath, Joshua realized his choice. "Let's do it." The farmer smiled, amusement glimmering in his eyes. "Good." The sun rose on a new day as the two former burglars found themselves working side by side with the very man they had tried to rob. At first, every chore felt like a punishment, hard labor that made their muscles ache, sweat streaming down their brows. Yet somewhere in the rhythm of planting seeds, hauling hay, and tending to animals, a transformation began. Days turned to weeks. They felt themselves changing. With each passing sunset, they learned the struggles of farming, the importance of patience, the joy of nurturing something from the ground up. It was hard work, yes, but with each planting season, they discovered the beauty of earning their keep, the satisfaction of a job well done. Eventually, they stood together during the harvest, the fruits of their labor sprawled out before them, colorful vegetables and ripe fruit, their hands stained with dirt but their hearts filled with an inexplicable joy. It wasn't gold, but it was real and meaningful. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the farmer joined them. "You see, boys, this is the real treasure. You've learned more about yourselves than I ever could have taught you through punishment," he said, pride evident in his voice. They laughed, breathless from hard work, feeling the warmth of camaraderie and the thrill of achievement, not through theft but through cooperation. There were no more dreams of getting rich quick, just dreams of continuing to grow together. In the months that followed, they transformed their lives. No longer thieves driven by greed, they became farmers rooted in resilience. The old tales of gold faded into the background, replaced by laughter shared among friends, the sense of community forged in the fields. And as they worked together under the vast expanse of the sky, they realized the true wealth lay not in wealth at all, but in the rich tapestry of life itself, a lesson they'd learned from the very man they once sought to deceive. Now, as they faced the dawn of each day with renewed purpose, they understood that sometimes the biggest treasures are hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right hearts to uncover them. And in that quiet transformation, the farmer had the last laugh, an old man who had guided lost souls back to life, revealing that it was never about the gold, but about the journey, the effort, and the bonds born from the simplest, most profound lessons of all. The deep silence of the countryside night was broken only by the quiet shuffle of footsteps on the overgrown grass. Two figures, cloaked in the shadows, edged closer to the old farmhouse, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. Joshua and Mark had made a pact born from desperation and a dream of riches. They believed the old farmer, a figure grumpy and decidedly secretive, was hiding a fortune. Treasure maps were drawn in their minds, and fantasies of gold coins and glittering jewelry echoed through their thoughts. Every step brought them closer to what they thought would be their escape from mundane lives. With the moon high above, casting an eerie glow, they approached the back door, the wood creaking ominously beneath their weight. "This is it," Joshua whispered, eyes gleaming with the thrill of the chase. "Just in and out." Mark nodded, both nervous and excited. Let's do this." They pushed the door open slowly and it groaned in protest as if warning them away. The inside of the house was steeped in darkness. Dust hung in the air and the smell of old wood and earth enveloped them. It felt alive, saturated with memories, with secrets yearning to be uncovered. As they stepped inside, the shadows seemed to close in around them, thickening the atmosphere. Mark asked, trying to ignore the rising tide of unease. "Let's check the living room," Joshua suggested, tension pulsing through him. They ventured deeper into the house, navigating the rooms like whispered secrets, shifting between piles of old furniture and faded photographs. In the living room, they began their search, rifling through drawers and tossing aside years of forgotten memories. Nothing sparkled, nothing glimmered. It felt like searching for a diamond in a crumbling pile of coal. As frustration began to bubble over, Joshua's thoughts turned dark. Mark shrugged, a nervous edge creeping into his voice. "I don't know, but this place feels weird, like we need to keep going," Joshua urged, feeling the weight of desperation creeping into his chest. As they moved toward the kitchen, the tension in the air felt electric. Every creak of the floorboards echoed through the empty house, sending jolts of adrenaline through their veins. They entered the kitchen, the dim light exposing countertop clutter and dusty cabinets. Mark muttered, his gaze moving over an old sink and a stack of dirty dishes. "Still might hide something good," Joshua replied, his focus locked on a large wooden cabinet at the far end of the room. With determined resolve, he approached, rattling the door before throwing it open with a bang. Inside were the same old utensils, pots and pans, nothing that resembled fortune. Anger flared in Joshua's chest, an all-consuming fire of disappointment. He shoved the door closed and turned to Mark, frustration spilling out of him. "Don't give up yet," Mark insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. The thrill was quickly unraveling, and both boys felt the cold grip of reality close in on them. Joshua felt a knot of dread twist in his stomach at the thought, but greed overruled caution. They ascended the creaking staircase, the wood groaning beneath their steps as they reached the second floor, where the air thickened with the secrets of the past. The atmosphere morphed, heavy with history. They moved down the narrow hallway, glancing at closed doors staring back at them like sentinels. With every step, the anticipation grew, intertwining with the tension. Joshua reached for the nearest door, hesitating for a moment before pushing it open. The room revealed little more than dust-covered furniture and dark corners. Disappointment gnawed at their resolve, but they pressed onward, hurriedly flinging open doors, each creak amplifying their mounting frustration. Finally, they reached the last door at the end of the hall. Together, they took a deep breath and threw it open. What lay before them was a sight beyond their wildest dreams, or so they thought. A brilliant golden hue bathed the room, the light reflecting off stacks of coins and jewelry that sparkled like stars in the night sky. Their hearts raced. This was it, the treasure they'd risked everything for. Holy Mark began but faltered as they rushed forward. Joshua knelt before the pile, frantically rifling through it, his hands trembling with the weight of the moment. But just as quickly, their excitement faded into confusion. The coins, although once shiny, were tarnished and old. The jewelry lay broken and rusted, more valuable as a piece of history than any fortune they could hope to grasp. Joshua's heart sank, frustration boiling over. "This isn't gold. This is..." Before he could finish, a deep voice interrupted him. Shooting up, they turned to see the farmer standing in the doorway, tall and sturdy, arms crossed and a bemused smile on his face. His presence felt commanding, the air shifting. He was not merely a farmer, but a man who had seen things, understood secrets that lay buried beneath the soil they had neglected. Mark stammered, urgency lacing his voice like panic. "Someone who should have locked the door better," the farmer replied, taking a step closer. Joshua felt his stomach twist. Desperation clawed at him and he stumbled for an excuse. "We didn't mean any harm." "Thought what?" The farmer's tone turned sharp, a mixture of amusement and disappointment. Mark shifted uneasily, looking back at the treasure laid out before them. He blurted out, trying to regain some control over the unfolding situation. The farmer shrugged, a knowing smile playing on his lips. "Gold is nice, but it doesn't bring real value." Joshua shot back, his anger flaring. "Let me show you," the farmer replied, his voice steady. He motioned for them to follow him downstairs, where the shadows deepened and the tension thickened. Mark asked, his resolve wavering. "Because I've been where you are," the farmer said, his gaze unwavering. Joshua hesitated, a flicker of curiosity breaking through his resentment. The farmer began to walk across the room, gesturing to the stacks of crops stored in jars and the rich soil kept in planters. "I grew up on this land, and I learned that it's not the gold that makes a man rich." The statement hit Joshua harder than he expected. A new perspective began to unfurl a desire to know more rather than just take. "Come, help me," the farmer said, his tone shifting to one of opportunity. "Spend a day working on the land." Mark sneered, but uncertainty edged his voice. "Because, boys," the farmer replied, "sometimes the lessons worth learning can't be found in a stack of coins." The idea sat heavy in the air. The thrill of thievery began to pale in the face of a challenge. What if this was an opportunity? They'd never experienced life outside their plans of robbery. What if working the land offered them something richer than they thought possible? A moment of silence hung between them, each boy weighing the options. In that instant, unspoken words flowed freely. Could they invest in something real? "Okay," Joshua said finally, voice steady. "We'll stay." The farmer's smile widened, warmth radiating from his presence. The next day, dawn's first light spilled across the fields, highlighting the worn tools waiting under the old barn. Joshua and Mark stood side by side with the farmer, their tools in hand, feeling strange and out of place, yet eager to see what the day held. The morning air was crisp, filled with the earthy scent of something new coming alive. They worked through the day, the labor initially foreign and heavy, their muscles aching from the demands of digging, planting, and picking. Yet, as the sun arched overhead, the satisfaction of their work began to dawn on them. Laughter slipped between the rows of crops as they shared stories, the farmer revealing tales of early mornings and late nights spent nurturing every seed. Joshua and Mark found themselves absorbed in the rhythm of labor, realizing this was far more invigorating than any short-lived thrill of burglary. Days turned into weeks, and they settled into a new routine. The boys might have initially come for gold, but they were learning to appreciate the true value of the land, feeling the connection grow deeper with each sunrise. They found joy in the simplest things: a seed sprouting, the fresh smell of rain-soaked earth, the camaraderie with each other, and the wise farmer who guided them. Life became a tapestry of colors and emotions, filled with the laughter that had long been absent. They forged friendships not out of desperation, but from a shared journey of growth. As they worked together, dedication transformed into pride and undeniable bond formed amid the rows of crops, their hands stained with the fruits of their labor. But the greatest gift came unexpectedly, shimmering softly beneath the surface of their once-lost dreams. They found fulfillment in hard work, the real treasure that didn't glint, but instead offered something richer than gold could ever promise. At the end of the harvest season, they stood in the field, gazing at the bountiful crop reaped from the land. The sun bathed everything in warm hues of orange and gold, and as laughter bubbled up between them, they realized they truly had become part of something special. "Looks like we did pretty good," Mark said, beaming, exhaustion mixed with pride. "Better than we ever could in a single night's theft," Joshua added, now vibrant with a purpose that had eluded them for so long. The farmer approached them, his gaze radiant. "We couldn't have done it without you," Joshua replied, sincerity spilling from his heart. The farmer smiled, his eyes twinkling. "You were always capable." In that moment, they understood what he meant. The journey they had taken from thieves in search of gold to men who learned to cultivate life had shaped them beyond what they ever thought possible. There was laughter where there was once greed, and fulfillment where there was emptiness. As the sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the field, they realized that true wealth didn't lie buried beneath the earth. It thrived in open skies, fresh air, and the connections shared between people who once felt lost but had finally found their way home. The farmer had shown them the way, not merely to grow crops but to grow themselves into better men. And as darkness descended, they stood side by side, not as burglars but as brothers, in love with the land that had stolen their hearts in ways they had never anticipated. In the end, the farmer did have the last laugh, reminding them with every whisper of the wind that sometimes it takes losing sight of what you thought you wanted to find the true treasures hidden within yourself. The night was thick with a sense of impending danger, a shroud wrapped around the old farmhouse that sat at the end of a dimly lit road. The creak of an old gate echoed like an omen as two figures slipped through the shadows, hearts racing, adrenaline coursing through their veins. Joshua and Mark were not just any intruders. They were burglars on a quest for a treasure rumored to be buried in the heart of the farmhouse of fortune that had captivated their every thought for weeks. Mark whispered, the excitement making his voice tremble. "Of course," Joshua replied, determination lacing his words. "People in town say he's hiding gold coins and old jewelry. We just need to be quick." As they approached the back door, the wind whistled a chilling tune, but they were undeterred. The thrill of possibility overshadowed their fears. They knew they had to act fast, and as Joshua reached for the door handle, a wave of confidence surged within him. With a quiet creak, the door swung open and they stepped inside. The air was heavy with dust and a musty smell hung in the darkness. Their eyes adjusted slowly, revealing a blend of old furniture and forgotten memories. It felt eerily alive, flooded with ghosts of the past. Mark asked, glancing nervously around the room until his gaze landed on a narrow hallway. "The living room looks promising," Joshua suggested, his voice firm. They crept deeper into the house, hearts pounding, every sound amplified in the tense silence. They rummaged through drawers and cabinets, tossing aside mundane items, a rusted kettle, old newspapers. Frustration tightened around Joshua's chest like a vice. It felt like searching for a needle in a haystack. Suddenly, Mark's eyes widened as he spotted a small, ornate box tucked away behind a dusty vase on a side table. He exclaimed, pointing. Joshua rushed over, heart leaping. He carefully lifted the box, the weight of it sending a jolt of hope racing through him. They gathered around, bated breath causing their chests to rise and fall quickly as Joshua opened the lid. Inside lay a few old coins, a collection of rusted, tarnished pieces that lacked the glimmer they had dreamed of. The reality of it stung like a slap in the face. Joshua exclaimed, slamming the lid shut, anger boiling over. "Maybe we should check upstairs," Mark suggested, but doubt laced his voice. They crept to the staircase, hesitating at the bottom. The wooden steps creaked under their weight, an eerie reminder that they weren't alone. Each step felt like it echoed their conscience. Were they really prepared for whatever awaited them upstairs? With a nod, they ascended. The long hallway creaked beneath their feet as they approached the first door. It was slightly ajar, and a sliver of light spilled through. "Let's take a look," Joshua said, pushing the door open wider. Inside, the room was a chaotic mess of dust-covered furniture and old photographs, the walls bearing witness to a life lived long ago. But among the clutter, they spotted a trunk, a large wooden chest, etched with intricate designs. Mark's eyes sparkled. With renewed enthusiasm, they rushed to the trunk, hearts pounding, hope rekindling. Joshua unlatched it with trembling fingers, raising the lid slowly. A swarm of glittering treasures met their eager gaze, shimmering coins stacked alongside forgotten trinkets. "This is it," Mark shouted, excitement bubbling over. But as they dug deeper, the thrill of victory rapidly shifted to disappointment. The coins, although shiny, were no more than odd bits of what appeared to be costume jewelry combined with some old rusted coins. Joshua seethed, anger bubbling to the surface. For a moment, everything fell silent. And then, from the shadows, emerged the farmer, a figure who seemed to materialize from nowhere. His expression was calm, almost amused, casting a long shadow over their burst of hope. "Looks like you boys found my collection," he stated, arms crossed, a knowing grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. Joshua and Mark jumped, hearts racing. Mark said, backing away. The farmer's tone was firm yet light-hearted, almost mocking. "What are you going to do?" Joshua challenged, anger rising again, but deep down, fear gnawed at him. "No need for that," the farmer replied, shaking his head as he stepped closer. "I've dealt with swindlers before." Mark asked, perplexed, glancing nervously at Joshua. "Let's do a little trade," the farmer suggested. "You came here looking for riches, but instead you found rust and dust." Joshua shot a confused glance at Mark. "What were you talking about?" "No," the farmer said, his eyes glimmering with cleverness. "Instead, what if you come back and help me on the farm for a week?" Mark furrowed his brow. "Because," the farmer replied, voice steady, "you wanted gold, but you won't find it without putting in the hard work." The tension in the air shifted. They had come for gold, but the farmer was offering something unexpected, an opportunity for growth and realization. "Listen," the farmer continued, "I could have you arrested for trespassing, but why not turn this misstep into a lesson? You say you want to be successful." Joshua felt the tide of his anger begin to ebb, curiosity creeping in. Was this the lesson they needed? Could they really turn their lives around? "Okay," he finally said, meeting the farmer's gaze. The farmer's grin widened. "Good choice, boys. Come back tomorrow morning before sunrise." That night, as Joshua lay in bed, the weight of uncertainty hung over him. Could they make this work? Would stepping into this new way of life be the change they really needed? The next morning, the sun barely peeked over the horizon when they returned, unused to the early hour. The farmer awaited them, tools lined up like soldiers awaiting instruction. "Welcome to your new beginning," he greeted, gesturing toward the equipment. They spent the day planting seeds, the earth rich and cool beneath their fingers. The work was grueling, muscles strained and aching by the end, but an unexpected exhilaration blossomed within them. With every seed they placed in the earth, they felt the thrill of crafting something real. The farmer remarked, watching them. As the days passed, they learned more than just how to farm. They learned discipline, resilience, and teamwork. They rose early and worked late, laughing and building bonds as they toiled together. For the first time, their goals shifted from quick riches to tangible growth, both in the fields and in themselves. Joshua found an unexpected joy in watching the plants grow, his heart swelling as new life sprouted from the soil. Mark's grin was infectious, joy spilling over as he planted rows of corn and watered the vegetables with increasing care. They woke each morning ready to face the sun, embracing the hard work it took to cultivate life. On one such day, as they took a moment to rest beneath the shade of a tree, Mark spoke up. "You know, I used to think wealth was about money and possessions." He gestured widely, encompassing the farm, the land, and the camaraderie they had built. "This is better." Joshua nodded, struck by the truth in his friend's words. It was never just about treasure, was it? Being part of the land, it's a different kind of light, the farmer chimed in, his eyes twinkling with understanding. Weeks flew by like summer clouds, and so did labor alongside laughter. The cycle of planting and harvesting became a rhythm, a melody of mindful work and discovery. Their character transformed. Light began to shine through their once murky pasts. With every sunset, the weight of their former lives began to fade. The harvest was abundant, a bounty that overflowed with the fruits of their labor. Joshua and Mark stood together, arms crossed, gazing proudly at rows of vegetables ready for market. Their dreams of riches had morphed into something richer than gold, filled with purpose, hard work, and friendships forged in sweat. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the farmer approached them, eyes bright with pride. "You boys really did it." "We couldn't have done it without you," Joshua replied, gratitude swelling within him. "No, you did this," the farmer countered, a smile breaking across his face. "You learned to value effort over ease." As they thrived in the glow of the evening light, laughter intermingled with the warm breeze. A new family forged from old mistakes. The true wealth they had gained was evasive yet profound, a bond that was worth far more than gold, warmed by the sun and the love of the earth. "The real treasure lies in sharing this," the farmer said, nodding toward the fields. Together they stood in harmony, bathed in golden light, realizing the depths of their journey, how they had come seeking riches and had found meaning, fulfillment, and connection where they least expected it. The farmer chuckled, a sound rich with understanding and wit, recalling the day he had first confronted them. "You see," and as the last rays of sunlight faded, Joshua and Mark understood. The treasure they sought had never been found within those walls. It had blossomed through the hard work, connection, and invaluable lessons learned along the way. And in the end, the farmer had both laughed and taught them the most important lesson of all: the wealth of life is buried deep beneath the surface, waiting for those brave enough to dig for it. The night was cloaked in darkness, a stillness that felt almost alive, teetering precariously on the edge of danger. Underneath a sky peppered with stars, two figures moved like phantoms, slipping through the tall grass that twisted around the old farmhouse. Joshua and Mark were a pair of small-town dreamers, craving escape, adrenaline coursing through their veins at the thought of treasure. They believed the old farmer, a grumpy soul known for hoarding oddities, was hiding a fortunate trove of gold coins and artifacts just waiting to be snatched. Mark whispered, excitement and fear mingling in his voice. "Of course. Everyone in town says he's loaded," Joshua replied, fueled by a heady mix of bravado and desperation. They crept closer, eyes darting nervously as they approached the back door. The wind sighed through the trees, a warning barely audible amidst their mounting eagerness. Joshua's heart raced, not just from anticipation but from the thrill of what lay ahead. A world of luxury, freedom from their dull lives, and the promise of adventure unfolded before them. With a swift motion, Joshua grasped the rusty doorknob. It turned smoothly, as if inviting them in. They stepped inside, a musty smell enveloping them, every corner steeped in shadow and mystery. A shiver ran down Mark's spine. "Stop being a baby," Joshua murmured, pushing deeper into the house. They moved cautiously, the wooden floors creaking underfoot, their footsteps echoing like a clock ticking down to their fate. Mark asked as they entered the dimly lit living room, filled with what felt like a lifetime of memories, dust gathering on the furniture, cobwebs hanging in the corners. "The kitchen," Joshua declared decisively, eyes gleaming. They pushed their way into the kitchen, eyes darting around at the remnants of a life long forgotten, rusty pans hanging from hooks, faded photographs lining the walls like echoes of the past. Joshua's hands trembled with anticipation as he rifled through drawers, throwing aside spoons and forks like they were worthless rocks at the bottom of a well. Mark peered into a cupboard, finding little more than chipped plates and old bottles. "Nothing here," he grumbled, the excitement gradually draining from his voice. Joshua urged, the thrill propelling him forward. Frustration bubbled beneath the surface, a growing storm inside him. Suddenly, a glimmer caught his eye. At the back of the kitchen, an old wooden cabinet stood ominously against the wall. It was dust-covered but somehow commanding. With a flicker of hope, Joshua rushed over, heart pounding. He wrenched the door open, and their eyes widened at the sight before them, coughing up cloudy dust. They found a hodgepodge of family heirlooms, dimly reflecting the secrets they hid. Faded jewelry, a rusted pocket watch, and a handful of old coins were tucked inside. "Just junk," Mark said, disappointment trailing his words. "Let's check upstairs," Joshua said, refusing to let the deep-rooted frustration extinguish his spirit. The staircase creaked alarmingly as they ascended, every step a foreboding reminder that they were intruders in someone else's world. At the top, the hallway stretched before them like a dark tunnel, doors lining the sides, each one hiding its own history. Joshua paused, glancing at each door. "We won't," Mark reassured, though uncertainty vibrated through his voice, echoed by the anxious rhythm of their heartbeats. They opened the first door. A small room greeted them, cluttered with dusty memories. An old bed frame, a rocking chair, and faded curtains that fluttered even without a breeze. Nothing of value lay there. Disappointment washed over them like a cold wave. With relentless determination, they pressed on, door after door revealing a life no longer lived, memories untouched, yet wealth lay just out of reach. When they reached the last door, anticipation crackled in the air. This had to be different. Joshua breathed, pushing the door open with a trembling hand. Inside was a room that felt worlds apart, glowing in the dim light of an oil lamp. A large trunk sat against the far wall, commanding their attention, draped in a veil of dust and mystery. "There," Mark shouted, pointing. Joshua approached cautiously, heart thundering like a drum. He knelt before the trunk, hands trembling as he unlatched it, the metal still cold beneath his fingers. With a heavy breath, he lifted the lid. But instead of shiny riches spilling forth, they were met with a mixture of old clothes, more tarnished coins, and a note scrawled in fading ink. Joshua shouted, anger rising like bile in his throat. Joshua's anger morphed into fury as he kicked the trunk shut. What a waste of time. Just then, laughter echoed from behind them. They spun around, eyes wide as they met the farmer's gaze. He stood tall, a slight smile playing on his lips, hands casually resting on his hips. Mark stammered, heart racing. "I'm the one you thought you'd rob," the farmer said, his tone thick with amusement. "We didn't mean any harm," Joshua blurted out, panic swelling in his chest. The farmer stepped forward, amusement turning to disappointment. The silence hung heavy in the air, each boy wrestling with the reality of their foolish ambition. "You don't understand," Joshua pleaded, shame creeping into his voice. "We just wanted." "Oh, I understand all too well," the farmer replied, his voice steady, echoing with years of experience. "You want gold, but what you need is purpose." Mark shot back, his voice trembling, fear crackling like lightning in the distance. The farmer paused, eyes narrowing. "Here's the deal. You can run away or you can stay and work for me. Earn something real, something that doesn't tarnish and disappear." Joshua and Mark exchanged stunned glances. The audacity of his suggestion struck them hard. Work. They had come to steal, not labor. Joshua asked, skepticism woven into his words. "Because I've dealt with plenty of thieves and liars, but you boys look like you just need a chance," the farmer replied, his voice calm yet commanding. Mark challenged, uncertainty dancing in his voice. "Because punishment doesn't change hearts. Opportunity does," the farmer said firmly, a glimmer of hope shining in his eyes. Joshua felt something shift within him. It was a seed of curiosity, a spark ignited by the farmer's words. Could this be a chance to break away from their outdated dreams of wealth? "Okay," Joshua finally said, determination flooding his voice. "We'll stay." The farmer nodded, a wise smile crossing his face. That night Joshua lay in bed, the weight of uncertainty heavy on his chest. Could they really change? Would this be the turning point in their lives? The next morning, just before dawn, they returned, the sky a soft hue of pink and orange. The old farmer was already hard at work, tools lined up like soldiers awaiting their orders. "Welcome," he said, gesturing toward a patch of land. The sun rose higher as they spent the day planting seeds, the earth rich and cool against their fingers. The work was grueling, muscles straining with every swing of the shovel, but surprisingly, as they planted row after row of seeds, something inside them began to change. With each plunge into the soil, they felt a new kind of exhilaration. As days turned into weeks, they learned more than just farming. They learned responsibility, discipline, and the value of hard work. They shared stories and laughter, quickly discovering that the journey was just as fulfilling as the destination. Marcus, who had once been filled with doubt, found himself smiling as he tended to the plants. He began to realize that there was peace in connecting with the land, a deep-seated joy that blossomed with the very growth they nurtured. Joshua found unexpected pleasure in watching the crops flourish under the sun. Each morning, they watched the world awaken around them, the gentle hum of bees, the soft rustle of leaves. As summer progressed, their bond with the farmer deepened. Their goals shifted from seeking wealth to nurturing life itself. Where they had once craved shiny treasures, they now cherished the simplicity of working the land, discovering pride in their efforts, giving birth to something new. In the evenings, they would sit together on the porch, sipping fresh lemonade and sharing stories. The farmer would often recount his youth, filled with lessons that shaped him. One such evening, Mark spoke up, his voice steady. "I used to think that riches were measured in gold, but this is worth so much more." The farmer nodded appreciatively. "That's the beauty of hard work, boys. It teaches us not just to see, but to appreciate. In every seed you plant, you find pieces of the life you're building." As they neared the end of the harvest season, the boys stood in awe, gazing at the rich bounty they had reaped. The fields were bursting with vegetables, colorful and vibrant, a testament to their labor. "We did this," Joshua said, pure pride lacing his voice. "Yes, you did," the farmer replied, satisfaction evident in every word. "This is what it means to earn your keep." The day of the harvest festival was a celebration, filled with laughter, joy, and memories crafted among friends under the vast expanse of the sky. As they danced, the boys realized they had forged a new path, one built not on theft, but on growth and fulfillment. When the sun set, they found themselves sitting with the farmer by a warm fire, the stars twinkling overhead. He looked at them, a glint of wisdom in his eyes. "Boys, you once sought to steal, but now you've cultivated something far richer." In that moment, Joshua and Mark understood. The treasure they had chased had led them not to riches, but to a new sense of purpose, a fulfillment that far exceeded any shimmering coin. And as the night unfolded, the farmer laughed deeply, a laugh that echoed across the fields, reminding them all that sometimes the greatest treasures lie not in what we seek, but in what we unwittingly create along the way. The night was thick with a heavy silence, punctuated only by the rustle of leaves swaying in the wind. At the end of a long, winding road sat an old farmhouse, its dilapidated windows staring out like weary eyes. Under the light of a crescent moon, two figures prowled through the tall grass, hearts racing, breath quickening with anticipation. They were not just any two people. They were burglars with a singular purpose. Joshua and Mark had heard the whispers in the dim corners of their small town. The old farmer who lived here was rumored to be hoarding gold, treasures tucked away from prying eyes, ripe for the taking. Mark hesitated, glancing over his shoulder. Shadows flitted about them, turning the night into a claustrophobic cocoon. "Absolutely," Joshua replied, eyes glimmering with eagerness. As they crept up to the farmhouse's back door, a chill ran through the air, clinging to them like a warning. Joshua grasped the doorknob, its cool surface sending a shiver up his spine. He turned it slowly, the door creaking open as if to invite them into a world where secrets lingered in the dust. Stepping inside, the musty scent of old wood filled their lungs. Dim light flickered from a lamp in the corner, illuminating a space crowded with memories-faded photographs, forgotten furniture, and shadows darting in the corners like whispers of the past. But it also felt alive, pulsing with the tension of a moment hanging in the balance. Mark asked nervously, surveying the room. "Let's check the living room," Joshua suggested, a sense of purpose guiding his steps. They ventured deeper, their footsteps echoing against the wooden floor, heartbeats synchronizing with the thrill of discovery. The living room was a time capsule, cluttered but strangely inviting. They rummaged through drawers and cabinets, tossing aside old photos, hats, and mismatched dishes, each moment dimming the fire of their excitement. "Nothing," Mark muttered, frustration creeping into his voice. Joshua insisted, sweeping his arms through the air as if promising more. "There has to be something." They moved on, pushing through the kitchen where the air felt heavier. Faded wallpaper peeled from the walls, revealing years of neglect. Objects from another era filled the countertop's dusty jars, rusted utensils, and an old kettle that seemed to sigh from disuse. It was like stepping into a world forgotten by time. Suddenly, Joshua spotted a glint of metal sticking out from a corner cabinet. His heart raced as he sprinted over, adrenaline pumping through his veins. He pried open the cabinet's door, revealing a collection of oddities: dull coins, old photographs, and rusted spoons. But instead of gold, what lay before them was decades of dust and disappointment. Joshua exclaimed, slamming the door shut, anger bubbling beneath the surface. Mark, caught between anxiety and excitement, suggested they explore upstairs. "Let's check the bedrooms." Facing the steep staircase, they hesitated. Shadows loomed around them, but ambition propelled them forward. Up they went, the stairs creaking ominously, each step echoing the rhythm of their hearts. At the top, a long corridor stretched out, lined with closed doors. Each door seemed to guard its secrets, waiting to reveal its hidden treasures or hidden horrors. Joshua asked, catching his breath. "Let's do it," Mark replied, squaring his shoulders, and with that, they pushed the first door open to reveal a sparsely furnished room, dust hanging in the air like a thick fog. A moth-eaten quilt lay across a bed, and sunlight barely filtered through grimy windows. Nothing of value awaited them. "Keep going," Joshua urged, and they moved on to the next door, hearts heavy with disappointment. After 3 more rooms, the same mess of forgotten memories, they reached the final door at the end of the hall. Mark bit his lip, eyeing Joshua. "Here we go," Joshua said, determination in his voice as he swung the door open. What lay inside was a sight that took their breath away. The room shimmered with gold. A gleaming chest sat in the middle, overflowing with glittering coins, complementing the glint in their eyes. Mark cried, disbelief sparking in his heart. But as they rushed forward, exuberance morphed into confusion when they saw the contents more clearly. Old coins and tarnished jewelry that held no value spilled out onto the floor. Dejected, Joshua dropped to his knees, flinging coins aside, searching for something more. Mark shouted, anger boiling in his veins, and just as the air thickened with their disappointment, an unexpected voice interrupted their unraveling hope. Startled, they turned to see the farmer standing before them, arms crossed, a glimmer of amusement dancing in his eyes. He was a sturdy figure, the embodiment of decades spent working the land, his presence commanding respect. Joshua stammered, heart pounding like a war drum. "I'm the owner of this treasure trove," the farmer replied, leaning back in confidence. Mark's voice wavered as he attempted to recover his composure. "We didn't mean any harm." "Thought what?" The farmer stepped closer and the tension in the air crackled. "We wanted to," Joshua began, but the farmer cut him off, his gaze penetrating. "Wanted to what? Live the easy life." Silence filled the room like a thick fog. The weight of realization pressed down upon them. They had come seeking gold, but instead they faced the man they intended to rob. "I could have you arrested for trespassing," the farmer said, calmly assessing their fear. "But I'm feeling generous today." Mark questioned, confusion flooding his voice. "In how to earn something worthwhile," the farmer replied. "You boys sought riches without understanding the labor that goes into building a real life. I'll give you a chance. Come back tomorrow and work on the farm for a week." The two burglars exchanged incredulous glances. Why would he help them? What could they possibly gain from laboring under a man who had just caught them stealing? Joshua challenged, his voice thick with skepticism. "Because," the farmer said, his tone firm yet patient, "greed leads to empty hands while effort leads to fulfillment." Joshua hesitated, contemplating the offer. Could this be their chance to step away from the darkness they'd chased for so long? "Okay," he said finally, voice steady. The farmer's smile widened, relief washing over his face. "Good choice." That night, Joshua lay in bed, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. Could they really find a new path? Would stepping away from their reckless ambition be the liberation they craved? Morning came drenched in golden light as the sun broke through the horizon. They arrived back at the farmhouse, some leftover anxiety swirling within them. The farmer stood waiting, his broad frame casting a shadow over the barn, tools lined up as if ready for battle. "Welcome to your first day," the farmer greeted, an encouraging smile on his face. They stepped into the rhythm of work, digging into the earth, planting seeds with hands caked in soil. The weight of labor felt heavy, their muscles straining under the intensity of the work. But with every seed they planted, they felt something inside them begin to shift. Days passed, and they fell into a routine that was both grueling and strangely satisfying. Laughter echoed through the fields as they shared stories, bonding over the struggles of hard work and the simple joys of life. Mark said one day as they took a break under the shade of an old oak tree. "Yeah," Joshua replied, wiping the sweat from his brow. "I thought gold would fill that gap in my life." The farmer's lessons seeped into their skin, transforming them in ways they hadn't anticipated. They began to take pride in their work. They planted, watered, and harvested, learning to respect the earth, appreciating the simple life that unfolded in rich colors before them. But just as they began to settle into this newfound purpose, a storm rolled through the area, dark clouds overshadowing their budding friendship. One night, as they sat around a fire, the farmer shared stories of how he had lost everything in a flood years ago. His voice thick with emotion, he expressed the vulnerability that came with a life intertwined with nature. "You see, boys, it's not just about hard work." As thunder rumbled overhead, doubt crept back into Joshua's mind. What if everything they'd built came crashing down? Days turned to weeks, and just as their bond with the farmer deepened, a realization set in that troubled them more than the storm. The gold coins they had sought stood stark against the lessons they were learning. They had traded in a quest for quick riches to cultivate a life filled with hardship but also reward. But then one day, just as the harvest season approached and their hard work promised to pay off, tragedy struck. A sudden storm, the likes of which the town hadn't seen in decades, swept through the fields, leaving destruction in its wake. Rain poured down in sheets, flooding the very crops they had nurtured with care. Joshua and Mark watched helplessly as the water washed away what they had sown, devastation marking their hearts like a deep scar. As the storm finally subsided, they stood amid the wreckage, their dreams of harvest crumbling like the very crops that had once promised glory. They turned to the farmer, eyes filled with panic and despair. Mark's voice quivered, fear evident in every word. The farmer looked at them, the weight of the storm reflecting in his eyes. "We rebuild," he said simply. But everything Joshua started, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "Nothing worth having comes without struggle," the farmer replied, a steel-like calm beneath the panic. "This isn't the end, boys, it's the beginning." The depth of those words hit them hard, both a lifeline and a stark reminder of the unpredictable nature of life. They had learned the value of hard work, but now they faced the challenge of rising from destruction. As they stood there, drenched in uncertainty, a new strength started to form. They weren't just fighting for themselves. They were fighting for each other, for the lessons they had learned, and for the life they were beginning to appreciate. "All right," Joshua said finally, determination burning in his eyes. But as they stepped forward to face the devastation, another powerful storm cloud began to gather on the horizon, a storm of uncertainty, a darkness threatening to pull them back into despair. They looked at the farmer, seeking assurance in his gaze, but instead they found the flicker of something more troubling. A shadow crossed his face, a hint of fear in his eyes as he peered into the distance. Mark asked, tension knotted tight in his stomach, and then from the edge of the fields they saw it. A light flickered far off in the distance. Flashing lights. It grew closer, and suddenly the realization hit them like a punch to the gut. The sheriff's car was racing toward them, blue lights flashing ominously as it approached the farm, and the three of them knew at that moment the past was not quite ready to let them go. The farmer barked, urgency in his tone. Heart racing, Joshua and Mark exchanged panicked glances, adrenaline flooding their bodies. Fate was inching closer, threatening to unravel everything they had built. And they all knew this was just the beginning of the battle that would determine their future. As the engine of the sheriff's car roared to life, the ground shook beneath them, and in the encroaching storm, they would have to decide what they truly valued: freedom, treasure, or the bonds forged through struggle, risking it all once more. With the weight of their choices pressing heavily upon them, they braced for whatever storm was about to break. In that moment, the line between their past and their present blurred, and they stood on the precipice of an unknown future, uncertain of the path that lay ahead but united in their fight for survival.